The Galactic War had raged for 20 long years between the Zor-El Empire and the Coalition of Nine, and the wounds of those years were written across the stars like scars burned into the void, with planets reduced to ashes, fleets shattered, and billions of innocent lives lost without reason except pride and hatred. Everyone believed they had already seen the worst of war. They believed the battlefield belonged only to them now, only to alien empires who had forgotten what true power looked like. Humanity had vanished so long ago that their name had become a whisper, a bedtime story, a legend told to frighten children into behaving, nothing more than a myth carried by old star maps nobody trusted anymore. But on that day, during the greatest and bloodiest battle near the broken moon of Lornis V, that myth returned, and the galaxy learned why legends are never truly gone. The Coalition was losing horribly, their ships burning like falling stars, their dreadnoughts cracking open under the brutal, merciless fire of the Zor-El Empire's war cannons. Commanders screamed orders, pilots cried over the comms, reactors overloaded, explosions tore through space like thunder, and the battlefield became a sea of dying lights. The Zor-El Empire pushed forward with absolute confidence, knowing they had already broken the Coalition's final defense line. The Coalition had no reinforcements, no secret weapons, nothing that could save them now. Their fate was sealed. Their defeat was moments away. And then, everything changed. Without warning, without sense, without logic, a strange blue tear opened in the middle of the battlefield, the fabric of space itself ripping open like paper under fire. A shimmering crack of light expanded slowly, quietly, unnaturally, glowing brighter and brighter until it looked like a second sun forming right between the burning fleets. Every alien commander froze. Every gunship hesitated. Even the Zor-El dreadnoughts, massive, heartless machines built only to destroy, stopped firing for a moment, as if the universe itself had told them to listen. "What is that?" whispered a Coalition officer, his voice shaking so badly he barely recognized it. Scanners tried to read the anomaly, but they glitched instantly. Numbers scrambled. Symbols broke. Entire systems rebooted in confusion. Nothing like this had ever appeared in the war. Nothing like this had ever appeared in living memory. The blue tear widened, swirling like a living storm, bending light around it. Even gravity twisted. Smaller ships drifted sideways as if pulled by an invisible tide. The battlefield fell into a deep, unnatural silence. Every soul, Zor-El and Coalition alike, stared at the glowing tear, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to understand what they were seeing. And then, the impossible stepped through. A massive shadow emerged, slow, deliberate, calm, its hull dark as midnight, its edges sharp as a blade, its surface marked by scars older than any empire present. An unknown warship. Silent. Colossal. Absolutely still. It glided through the blue tear with the quiet confidence of something ancient waking from a long sleep. The blue rift closed behind it as if it had never existed. No alarms sounded. No weapons charged. No beacons blinked. The ship simply existed, and that alone sent a wave of cold fear through every ship in the battlefield. Identity unknown, whispered every scanner in broken voices. Origin unknown, classification unknown, impossible size, impossible structure. Even the Zor-El Emperor aboard his throne ship narrowed his eyes, sensing something deeply wrong. For the first time in decades, fear touched his heart. Coalition captains stared, stunned, whispering to each other. "What is that thing? Who built that?" The ship didn't move aggressively. It didn't activate weapons. It drifted slowly, peacefully, almost like it was observing the war with a calm disappointment, as if tired of what it was seeing. But as it came closer, the details of its hull became clear. Massive engraved plates of old Terran steel, glowing blue lines running across its armor like veins, markings carved deep into its frame. Ancient writing. Symbols no alien could translate, but every historian had seen in forgotten fragments of lost human records. And then the moment arrived that changed the galaxy forever. A symbol, large, bright, burning with blue light, glowed on the ship's forward hull. A symbol everyone recognized even though they wished they didn't. A Terran symbol. The sign of humanity. The battlefield froze. Every ship, every pilot, every commander, Every general, Zor-El and coalition, fell into absolute silence. Hearts stopped. Breath vanished. Even the stars seemed to dim. Humanity, the ghosts of the past. The species the galaxy claimed to have erased forever. The race whose disappearance had shaped centuries of fear and speculation. They were real. They were alive. And they had returned. Coalition soldiers cried out in disbelief. Zor-El captains shouted orders that never left their mouths. Every scanner glitched violently, sparks shooting from consoles. Alarms rang without meaning. Some ships dropped power entirely from shock alone. The Terran warship continued drifting into the heart of the battle, silent and unthreatening, yet radiating a presence so powerful that it felt like gravity itself bowed before it. Its armor was like a black mirror reflecting dying stars. Its engines pulsed soft blue, not loud or aggressive but steady and controlled. It looked like something built not for war, but for judgment. The Terran ship stopped completely at the center of the battlefield. Then, every weapon on every ship stopped functioning. The Zor-El dreadnoughts lost engine power. Coalition frigates suddenly floated helplessly. Fighters lost thrusters. The entire battlefield went dark and silent. One single Terran ship had shut down an entire galactic war in seconds. Pilots screamed. Commanders choked on fear. Even the Emperor's throne ship lost its shields. And then, a soft sound echoed through every comm channel. Not static. Not a code. Not a threat. A voice calm, human, ancient. We have returned. Gasps erupted across the battlefield. Some soldiers fainted. Some cried. Some trembled so hard they couldn't stand. The voice continued, steady and emotionless. This war ends now. Every alien heart dropped. Coalition ships shook with hope. Zor-El ships shook with dread. The human voice grew slightly colder, as if disappointed. We left the galaxy once, but we did not die. We watched. We waited. And now, we cannot allow this destruction to continue. The Terran ship glowed, the blue veins pulsing brighter. The human voice spoke again. Stand down, or be removed. The Zor-El Emperor, red with rage and fear, screamed at his crew to fire all weapons, but nothing responded. His dreadnought was powerless. He slammed his fist against the console, a broken sound leaving his throat. This cannot be happening. Humans cannot be alive. But they were. The Terran ship broadcast an image of Earth, renewed, rebuilt, powerful. Its cities glowing, its fleets rising in orbit. Humanity had not only survived. Humanity had grown. Humanity had evolved. Humanity had become something the galaxy could never defeat. Coalition soldiers wept. Some whispered, they came back. They really came back. The Terran voice delivered one final message that cracked the battlefield open like a wound reopening after centuries. For too long, you believed the war was yours. You believed the galaxy was yours. But you were wrong. The ship hummed, a low vibration that shook every heart. This battlefield is ours now. Silence. Deep. Final. Absolute. And in that moment, the galaxy understood a truth it had feared for thousands of years. Humanity had returned, and the war no longer belonged to anyone else. Panic spread through the battlefield like wildfire the moment the Terran ship finished its chilling message, and the silence that followed felt far heavier than the loudest explosion, because every alien, Coalition and Zor-El alike, felt something they had never experienced before. The feeling of being judged by a presence far older and far stronger than anything they had ever faced. The engines of the Zor-El dreadnoughts flickered uselessly, their reactors choking under the invisible pressure the Terran ship radiated, while Coalition ships, though desperate for salvation, felt a different kind of fear that humanity's return was not mercy but a warning. Commander Iselin of the Coalition's last surviving flagship gripped the edge of her console, her hands trembling as she stared at the massive Terran vessel floating silently in the center of the battlefield like a monument to a forgotten age. "Is it really them?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Her officers couldn't answer. Their eyes were locked on the glowing Terran symbol carved deep into the battleship's hull, a symbol older than their entire civilization. Across the battlefield, the Zor-El Emperor watched with wild eyes, unable to understand how one single warship could shut down an entire war. His empire's pride, his victory. He slammed his fist against the armrest of his throne. "Restart engines. Fire something. Anything," he shouted. But his commands were useless. Nothing responded. All his power, all his might, all his centuries of conquest meant nothing in the face of one quiet Terran vessel. On the coalition side, pilots cried inside their cockpits. Tears streaming down their faces as hope and fear mixed inside their chests like fire and ice. They had been losing moments ago, dying, burning, collapsing, and now, in one impossible moment, the war had paused because humanity had chosen to speak. Yet no one knew whether that meant salvation or something far more terrifying. Suddenly, the Terran battleship moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just a slow, precise shift that felt more threatening than any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. The movement was controlled, intentional, as if the ship was not adjusting course but deciding its judgment. The blue rift light running along its hull brightened, glowing softly like a heartbeat. And then another pulse spread from the ship, a wave of energy so quiet that it didn't shake hulls or overload systems, it shook souls. Coalition technicians gasped as ancient human code appeared on their screens, symbols they had never learned but somehow understood instinctively. It was not a threat. It was a message. The Terran voice returned, but now it sounded heavier, deeper, carrying a tone that felt like grief mixed with steel. "You fight for territory. You fight for pride. You fight for names on maps. But we fought to survive extinction." Those words hit the battlefield harder than any weapon. Zorel captains lowered their heads, coalition soldiers stopped breathing, and even the Emperor felt his anger falter. A hologram flickered across every ship, images of Earth long ago, cities burning under alien fire, human children crying in bunkers, Terran soldiers holding lines against impossible odds, humanity pushed to the edge of existence. The galaxy had erased these memories. But humanity had not. The hologram shifted again, showing hidden human colonies in dark star systems. Humans rebuilding, teaching children to fight, constructing massive shipyards inside hollowed asteroids, preparing for the day they would no longer hide. The battlefield trembled with emotion. Even hardened soldiers felt their eyes fill with tears at the sight of a species rising from its own ashes like a star reborn. Another pulse spread from the Terran warship, and suddenly all disabled ships regained partial power. Just enough for life support to stabilize, just enough for emergency lights to flicker back on, just enough to let every species breathe again. Humanity had chosen not to kill. Humanity had chosen not to punish. Humanity had chosen to show restraint. The kind of restraint only a civilization that had known unbearable pain could possess. The Terran voice spoke again, softer than before, almost sorrowful. "We did not return for conquest. We returned because you lost control of your own war." These words rippled across the battlefield like an icy wind. Coalition commanders looked at each other in shame. Zorel soldiers stared at the floor, their pride shattered. In one sweeping breath, every empire realized they were children playing with fire and humanity. The species they once tried to erase had come back not to destroy them, but to stop them from destroying themselves. Then the Terran ship did something that froze the galaxy in absolute shock. It extended massive energy wings from its sides, shimmering structures of blue light that looked like ancient shields unfolding across the stars. These wings expanded outward, surrounding both the Coalition and Zorel fleets in a massive protective sphere. Outside the sphere, space itself distorted, as if the Terrans were shielding the entire battlefield from something far worse. Coalition officers panicked, believing it was a trap. Zorel generals shouted that humanity was about to imprison them. But Commander Iselin stared, eyes wide, her voice trembling not with fear but with realization. "They are not trapping us," she whispered. "They are stopping the war from spreading." And she was right. Moments later, a massive Zorel reinforcement fleet dropped out of warp on the far edge of the system. Thousands of ships, armed and ready to finish the battle. But they slammed into the Terran shield like waves crashing against stone. Not one ship penetrated. The galaxy gasped in horror and awe. Humanity had built technology that could shield two entire war fleets while blocking another. No one knew how. No one asked. They just understood. Humanity was no longer a species. Humanity was a force. The Terran voice spoke once more, quiet but sharp. Do not fight. Do not run. Do not resist. The war is no longer yours. Tears rolled down Isolin's face as she whispered, "They're taking the battlefield back." Across from her, the Zor-El Emperor collapsed into his throne. The weight of a truth he never wanted to face crushing his chest. Humanity had returned. Not as victims. Not as ghosts. Not as myths. But as something stronger than war itself. And as the Terran ship pulsed softly in the silence, the galaxy finally understood the terrifying, beautiful truth. The war that everyone believed belonged to alien empires never belonged to them at all. It belonged to humanity the moment they stepped onto the battlefield. The battlefield floated in an eerie stillness after the Terran ship sealed both fleets inside its massive energy sphere, and the silence felt like a living thing crawling through every cockpit, every command room, every trembling heart as the galaxy tried to understand what was happening and what humanity wanted after all these centuries of hiding in forgotten shadows. Coalition soldiers, still shaken from the edge of death, stared at their screens as the Terran vessel hovered like a silent guardian, its blue pulse moving through the shield walls like a calm heartbeat, while Zor-El warriors, once proud, once unstoppable, now felt like children lost in darkness, unable to raise their weapons, unable to fight, unable to even speak because the presence of the Terran ship crushed their pride deeper than any defeat they had ever known. Commander Isolin watched with trembling breath as her ship's scanners restarted, but instead of data, they displayed fragments of ancient Terran code, old human symbols that no alien officer understood, yet all of them felt in their bones, like echoes from a forgotten time calling back to life. "Why are they showing us this?" her young technician whispered, wiping tears he didn't understand. Isolin shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed on the Terran vessel. "Because this isn't about us," she murmured. "This is about what we did to them." Across the battlefield, the Zor-El Emperor's rage twisted into something far more fragile, fear mixed with guilt. He stared at the gigantic Terran warship through his throne ship windows, the blue light reflecting in his trembling eyes. "It cannot be them, it cannot," he whispered, his voice cracking as memories he tried to bury clawed their way back. The old stories, the secret archives, the forbidden truths of the great human purge, the ones in every empire hid under mountains of lies. And as the Terran ship pulsed again, sending a gentle wave of energy through the sphere, every ship's holoscreen activated at once, projecting an image that hit the entire battlefield like a stab to the heart. Earth. Not the modern Earth. Not the glowing rebuilt Earth humanity had shown before. No, this was Earth during the purge. Burning. Screaming. Breaking. Human cities torn apart under alien fire. Families running through collapsing streets. Terran soldiers fighting with weapons older than their enemies' newest drones, holding the line with broken armor, blood on their hands, and determination in their eyes. Children crying in underground shelters. Fire swallowing the sky. Buildings crumbling like sand. Humanity's darkest hour displayed in front of their executioners and their descendants. Coalition soldiers covered their mouths in horror. Zor-El officers looked away in shame. Some couldn't watch, but the Terran ship forced the images to play, not out of cruelty, but because the galaxy needed to see the truth it buried. The hologram shifted to show Terran refugees escaping into deep space, hunted across stars by fleets far larger than them, driven into uncharted regions, losing world after world, loved one after loved one, until only fragments of humanity remained. The next images showed humans crawling into hollowed asteroids, surviving inside cold metal caverns, building their first secret cities with nothing but bare hands, grit, and broken hope. The entire battlefield trembled with emotion. The truth wasn't just painful. It was unbearable. Selka, the young coalition pilot, pressed her hand to her chest as tears streamed down her cheeks. "How did they survive that?" she whispered, voice soft and breaking. Her co-pilot answered with trembling breath, "Because they are human." The hologram faded, replaced by the Terran fleet rising out of darkness over the centuries, ship by ship, generation by generation, until the final image showed the very Terran battleship that now hovered in front of them, glowing like an ancient soul forged from grief and fire. The human voice entered the comms again, softer than ever, carrying the weight of 1,000 years. "We did not show you the past to demand tears," the voice said. "We show you because you lied to your children. You lied to yourselves. And you lied to the galaxy." The Zor-El Emperor closed his eyes, shaking violently. His entire empire was built on the lie that humans were monsters. His pride began to collapse. His soul cracked with guilt he never thought he was capable of feeling. The Terran voice continued, "You fight for control. We fought to survive. You destroy because you can. We built because we had to." Every word sank like a stone into every heart across the battlefield. The Terran ship pulsed again, and suddenly every weapon from both sides fell offline permanently. Not broken, not destroyed, but gently neutralized. No ship could fire again. No war could continue. No empire could claim victory. Humanity had taken the battlefield away from them completely. The shields holding the fleets inside glowed brighter, then slowly expanded outward, revealing more Terran ships materializing through miniature blue rifts, forming a halo of warships around the sphere. The galaxy felt like it was standing in front of a silent tribunal. Commander Isilin felt her legs weaken. This is their battlefield now," she whispered. The human voice, still calm, still unbearably soft, spoke again. "This war ends today. Not because you chose peace, but because we will not let our galaxy burn again." Everywhere across the battlefield, aliens cried, not from fear, but from understanding. They finally understood why the Terrans stepped in. Why the Terrans returned. Why the Terrans could not stay hidden any longer. Humanity wasn't here to conquer. Humanity wasn't here to demand vengeance. Humanity was here because the galaxy had failed to protect itself. And as the Terran ship turned slowly, engines glowing like a dying star reborn, the galaxy realized the truth that would echo across every planet, every ship, every species for. The moment the holograms faded and the battlefield returned to its terrifying quiet, every soul inside the Terran shield felt the weight of a history they never lived, a guilt they inherited without choice, and a fear they couldn't escape, because the humans were no longer an extinct rumor. They were here, breathing, watching, deciding the fate of an entire war with a single ship and a voice that carried the weight of centuries. As the blue energy sphere pulsed gently, it felt less like a barrier and more like a heartbeat surrounding the fleets, as if the Terran vessel itself was alive, thinking, remembering every wound the galaxy had inflicted on its people. Commander Isilin wiped her shaking hands on her uniform, but the trembling wouldn't stop. She watched the Terran ship glide forward a few meters, a movement so slow yet so powerful that it made her breath catch in her throat. No other species could make a single shift in position feel like a judgment. On the Zor-El throne ship, the Emperor's anger had burned away completely, replaced by a cold, suffocating horror as he stared at the Terran emblem glowing like an ancient scar. He knew then, this was no bluff, no trick, no technological illusion. This was humanity, the species his ancestors tried to destroy, standing in front of him stronger than any empire in the galaxy. His voice cracked as he whispered to the empty air, "What have we awakened?" His generals refused to meet his eyes. Their faces were pale, their hands trembling, their pride shattered into dust. For the first time in Zor-El history, they felt inferior. But before anyone could gather their thoughts, the Terran flagship released another wave of energy. This one quieter, softer, like a breath after a long cry. It spread across both fleets, and every ship began to glow faint blue for a moment. A new hologram formed, not of war, not of destruction, but of the Terran homeworld now. Earth, fully rebuilt. Cities glittering like stars. Towering structures reaching the clouds. Children playing in fields under a calm sky. Terran citizens walking proudly through streets made of shining glass and reinforced steel. Humanity hadn't just survived. They had flourished. Isilin felt tears fill her eyes. They rebuilt everything, everything we destroyed. A whisper from one of her officers replied, voice cracking, and they rebuilt it better. The Zor-El Emperor watched the hologram in silence, each image cutting into him like a blade. Earth's beauty was undeniable. Humanity's resilience was undeniable. And the galaxy's guilt was undeniable. The scene shifted again, showing massive Terran shipyards, vast rings of silver surrounding dark suns, constructing warships quietly in the shadows of distant systems. The ships were bigger, stronger, and crafted with a level of precision no species had achieved. Terran technology was beyond anything the galaxy had seen. Even the oldest empire could not match it. Selka, the young coalition pilot, felt her entire body tremble as she whispered, "They were preparing, but not for war." Her co-pilot nodded slowly, his voice hollow. "They were preparing to protect themselves from us." The realization crushed them. It crushed everyone. The Terrans didn't hide out of fear. They hid because they knew the galaxy would never accept their existence. They hid because survival demanded silence. And now that silence was broken. Suddenly, the Terran commander's voice returned, echoing slowly across every comm channel with a tone so calm and heavy that it felt like the entire battlefield bowed in respect. "You have seen our past," he said softly. "Now see why we returned." The hologram transformed again, showing images of the current war. Zorel bombs falling on neutral colonies, coalition retaliations destroying innocent trade stations, planets swallowed by fire, children wandering through rubble, bodies buried beneath collapsed cities. The truth became clear. This was no longer a war for land. This was a war of ego, of pride, of hatred, a war that had forgotten its purpose. The human voice broke the silence. "We know this war. We lived this war. And we will not let you repeat our fate." His voice deepened. "Not again." The weight of those two words hit the battlefield like a thunderstorm. Then the Terran ship did something that left the entire galaxy speechless. It powered every weapon system at once, but instead of pointing the cannons outward, toward the Zorel fleet or the coalition forces, the weapons pointed upward, toward the empty space, firing massive beams of blue light that carved slow, bright lines through the void. It was not an attack. It was a signal, a declaration, a reminder. The beams formed a massive symbol across the sky, a glowing Terran crest, stretching across the stars like a scar of light. It glowed for 10 long seconds before fading. And then the Terran commander spoke the line that made even the bravest soldiers tremble with emotion. "We are not your enemies. We are your consequence." Every ship fell silent. Every soul bowed its head. Even the Emperor felt tears fall down his face. Humanity hadn't come to destroy. They had come to hold the galaxy accountable for the lies it chose to live in. The Terran commander then said, softly, "This war ends today. And what comes next depends on you." A deep hush fell. It was the sound of a galaxy facing truth for the first time. The Terran ship's engines dimmed, the blue shield flickered lightly, and the entire battlefield waited, helpless, humbled, and forever changed. Because in that moment, every alien understood. The moment the Terran commander's words faded into silence, the entire battlefield seemed to collapse into a single heartbeat. A moment so heavy and quiet that even the burning wreckage drifting through space felt like it dared not crackle too loudly, because humanity had not just spoken, they had judged. And every species inside the Terran shield now felt the weight of that judgment crushing their chests like a mountain they could no longer ignore. Coalition officers sat frozen at their consoles, staring at the lingering echo of the Terran crest burned across the sky, their minds struggling to process the truth that the war they thought they controlled had never belonged to them at all. Zorel generals, once proud and ruthless, now felt like lost children stranded in the dark, trembling under the awareness that the species they once laughed at, hunted, and erased had returned not as victims, not as ghosts, but as protectors who refused to let another generation of innocents suffer what humanity had endured. Commander Iselin gripped the edge of her command table, her knuckles white as she whispered to herself, "What happens now?" But she already knew the answer, because she could feel it in her bones. Nothing would ever be the same again. The Zorel Emperor, still in his throne ship, stared at the fading symbol in the sky with tears running down his face. Tears not of fear, but of something far more painful, shame. A shame so deep it felt like it crawled through his blood. Because he finally realized that everything his empire built was constructed on the lie that humans were weak and forgettable. He had been raised on stories that painted humanity as savage animals who brought destruction wherever they went. But now, watching the Terran fleet hovering like guardian spirits above the battlefield, he understood the truth that shattered his pride into dust. Humanity did not destroy because they were monsters. humanity destroyed because the galaxy forced them to survive. That realization crushed him more than any weapon ever could. The Terran ship pulsed again, sending another wave of soft blue light through the shield, and every screen across both fleets flickered to life with a new hologram. This time showing the galaxy's future, not its past. Worlds falling into darkness if the war continued. Entire sectors collapsing under the weight of hatred. Refugees drifting through space until they died. Children born into fire. Laughter replaced by sirens. Hope replaced by fear. It was a timeline so bleak that even the hardest Zor-El officers turned away, unable to watch the universe crumble because of their pride. But then the hologram shifted, and the battlefield trembled as a new image unfolded. The future if humanity intervened. Worlds rebuilding. Former enemies working together. Children from different species learning side by side. Star systems filled with peace, not war. The future humanity wanted. The future humanity demanded. The future humanity believed the galaxy still deserved if it chose the right path. "They're giving us a choice," Selka whispered from inside her fighter, tears falling silently down her cheeks. Her co-pilot nodded, voice trembling. A second chance. Something they never got. And that truth hit harder than any weapon, because humanity was offering mercy the galaxy had never shown them. Suddenly, the Terran commander's hologram returned, his eyes calm. But behind that calm existed a sadness so deep that it made even the most battle-hardened warriors feel their hearts crack. "We cannot undo the past," he said, his voice soft but carrying across billions of listeners. "We cannot return the lives that were taken. But we can stop you from repeating the same mistakes." His gaze hardened, becoming sharp as a blade. "You did not fear the war. You feared what you would become because of it. And you were right." The Zor-El Emperor bowed his head, unable to speak, unable to pretend his empire was righteous. The coalition commanders felt their breaths grow shallow as they realized that humanity, the species they thought extinct, understood them better than they understood themselves. The human commander continued, "You wanted victory. You wanted power. You wanted control. But war steals all of that, and leaves nothing but ashes." The Terran ship glowed brighter, and its energy wings expanded outward, illuminating the entire battlefield in deep blue light, casting shadows that looked like ancient Terran guardians standing watch. "We step into this war not as conquerors," the humans said, "but as the ones who survived the worst and refused to let your world become our past." Then something unexpected happened. Every Terran ship outside the sphere activated their engines, and slowly, silently, they formed a line behind the Terran flagship. The formation was terrifying in its perfection. Not one ship drifted even a meter off alignment. Not one engine faltered. Not one movement hesitated. It was a symphony of power and discipline, the kind only a species forged by fire and loss could achieve. Coalition soldiers stared in awe. Zor-El soldiers stared in terror. The entire galaxy stared in silence. Humanity had arrived with one ship, but now an entire Terran armada stood ready behind them, engines glowing like 1,000 blue suns, waiting for the next command. And yet, none of them pointed their weapons at anyone. Not at the Zor-El. Not at the Coalition. Not at any world. Their weapons were angled downward, peaceful but ready. It was not a threat. It was a promise. A promise that humanity was here to end the war, not expand it. The human commander spoke his final words of the transmission, and those words would echo across every world for generations. The battlefield remained suspended inside the Terran sphere like a frozen memory, a place where time itself seemed afraid to move, because everything that came next would rewrite the galaxy's destiny. And every species inside that blue glow understood that humanity was no longer just a player in the war. They were the final decision, the last word, the unstoppable force that had risen from centuries of suffering to stand as judge over those who once believed themselves superior. Coalition officers stared at their consoles as if expecting the screens to explode from the pressure, their hearts pounding with a mix of hope and fear so strong it made their limbs shake. Zor-El soldiers stood paralyzed in horror, realizing they were trapped not by weapons, but by truth, truth that their empire had built its identity on lies, truth that the humans they erased had returned stronger than any species in the galaxy, truth that they were no longer the hunters, but the hunted by their own guilt. Commander Isolin felt her breath catch in her throat as she watched the Terran fleet beyond the sphere shift again, forming an enormous circling pattern around the shield. It wasn't a blockade. It wasn't a cage. It was a message. You are under our protection and our judgment. The human commander's voice returned one final time, but this time it didn't come through the comms. It came through the Terran ship itself, vibrating through the battlefield with a calm that made every alien freeze. You stand here today not as warriors, the voice said, heavy with sorrow, but as the children of a galaxy that has forgotten what life is worth. His voice softened. We remember, because we lived through the day when our world forgot us. Those words felt like knives twisting in every heart, because the images of burning Earth, of human children running through smoke, of Terran soldiers dying with defiance in their eyes were still carved fresh into everyone's memory. The Terran ship pulsed again, and a new hologram appeared, this one not of past war, but of something far worse. It showed a possible future if the war continued. Burning planets falling like dying suns, collapsing star systems, refugees screaming for help in the void while empires ignored their cries, entire species dying without a trace, the galaxy eating itself until nothing but ruins remained. Even the Zor-El Emperor, who had once taken pride in destruction, felt his heart break. He whispered through shaking lips, "We did this. We created this future," but the Terran hologram shifted again, showing a different path. Worlds rebuilding, alliances forming, children from different species running together on grassy fields, ships traveling through peaceful star routes, the galaxy healing. Humanity wasn't forcing a threat. They were offering a choice. Selka, inside her fighter, felt tears fall endlessly as she whispered, "Why are they helping us, after everything we did to them?" Her co-pilot didn't answer, because he couldn't. The Terran commander's voice responded instead, as if hearing the question across space. "Because we know what it feels like to scream for help, and hear nothing." The battlefield broke. Soldiers sobbed. Generals lowered their heads. Even the Emperor covered his face with trembling hands. Then the Terran ship did something no one expected. It lowered its weapons completely, powering them down in a gesture that felt like a hand reaching toward an enemy offering forgiveness. Every alien gasped, because this was not weakness. This was strength so absolute it didn't need to show force. Humanity had nothing to fear. They had already won. And now they were offering the galaxy a chance to rise with them. The shield around the fleets flickered, and for a moment everyone feared it would collapse, but instead it expanded upward, opening a single corridor of light that led into deep space. The message was clear without a single word. You can leave. You can walk away from war. You can choose peace, if you are brave enough to admit your mistakes. Commander Isolin closed her eyes, feeling a weight lift she didn't know she carried. "They are letting us go," she whispered. On the Zor-El throne ship, every officer turned to their emperor, waiting, trembling, for his command. But he stayed silent, staring at the Terran ship with a shattered expression, until he finally whispered the words no Zor-El had ever said in their history, "Stand down. We cannot fight them. We cannot fight the truth." It was not surrender. It was acceptance. And as the Zor-El fleet powered down, the coalition followed, their ships gently turning toward the corridor of light. The Terran voice spoke one last time, quiet as a fading heartbeat. "Leave this battlefield. Leave this war. And remember the day humanity returned, not to destroy you, but to save you from becoming us." The words hit every soul with a force stronger than any weapon. Slowly, trembling, humbled, the fleets began to move through the corridor, passing beneath Terran ships that hovered like silent guardians. Not one human vessel fired. Not one moved aggressively. They simply watched, measuring the galaxy's choice. And as the last alien ship crossed the border of the corridor, the Terran shield closed behind them like a soft sigh as the last Zor-El and coalition ships drifted out of the glowing Terran corridor and the great shield sealed silently behind them. A deep trembling hush spread through the entire galaxy, because for the first time in 20 long, bloody years, the war had ended without a victor, without a final battle, without destruction. Ended not by diplomacy, not by surrender, but by the return of a species that had been forgotten, underestimated, erased from history yet rebuilt themselves in the shadows with a strength so unbreakable that no empire dared challenge the decision humanity had made for them. Outside the battlefield, news spread faster than light. Entire planets stopped their daily lives to watch the broadcasts. Families gathered around glowing screens, children clutching their parents' hands as images of the Terran fleet filled the sky, and elders who once heard rumors of humans in their youth wept as the myths they carried in their hearts turned into reality. Across star stations, markets, and great cities, people whispered the same words over and over again. The humans returned. The humans stopped the war. And those words spread through star systems like wind carrying hope through a dead forest. But inside the battlefield, still trapped in the aftermath of the Terran presence, the Zor-El Emperor remained on his throne ship, unable to move, unable to breathe normally as the crushing truth settled in his chest like a weight too heavy to lift. He had commanded armies that wiped out colonies. He had burned worlds. He had laughed at the stories of humans and called them weak. Now he understood how foolish he had been. His voice trembled as he whispered to himself, "We were never powerful, not compared to them." His generals watched him silently, their faces pale, their pride shattered. None dared to speak. None dared to lift their heads. Because they all knew, if humanity had chosen to, they could have destroyed them all in one heartbeat. On the Coalition flagship, Commander Iselin felt her legs weaken as she stared at the empty space where the Terran ship had hovered only moments before. Her officers sat in stunned silence, tears drying on their faces, breaths shaky as they tried to understand what they had just experienced. "We were children fighting with fire," she finally whispered, her voice breaking. "And they were the ones who pulled us away before we burned ourselves." Selka, still inside her fighter, had not moved for long minutes, staring at the stars with a heart that felt too full and too heavy at the same time. "Why did they save us?" she whispered softly, not to anyone, but to the universe itself. Her co-pilot's voice cracked as he answered, "Because nobody saved them. Because they don't want anyone to feel what they felt." And Selka, thinking of the holograms of burning Earth, felt her chest tighten with grief for a world she never knew, a species she never met, but one she now understood more deeply than she understood her own people. Then something happened that shook everyone even more. The Terran ship returned. Not through the rift, not through a dramatic entrance, just a soft shimmer of light flickering in space as the massive vessel faded into view once again. Coalition ships panicked for a second. Zor-El ships readied themselves instinctively, but no threat came. The Terran ship simply hovered silently, like a guardian watching over a battlefield that was no longer a battlefield. Then, without warning, a final hologram appeared across all ships, one last message. The human commander's face appeared again, but this time the expression was different. Not stern, not sorrowful, but tired, deeply tired, as if carrying the weight of centuries on his shoulders. "You must understand something," he began, his voice softer than any message before. "We did not return for glory. We did not return for revenge. We returned because the galaxy cannot afford another extinction." His eyes darkened. "Not ours. Not yours." The hologram shifted to images of human children playing under Terran skies, of Terran soldiers training in peace, of families rebuilding in love, of scientists shaping new stars and engineers constructing wonders. Humanity had not returned to rule the galaxy. Humanity had returned to protect the kind of life they almost lost forever. "We come with strength," the commander said, "but also with hope." His voice trembled slightly. "Do not make us choose between the two." Those words carried more power than any weapon. They were not a threat, they were a plea. A plea from a species that survived hell and now stood as a shield for the galaxy, not a sword. The Zor-El Emperor bowed his head, a gesture no Zor-El leader had performed in documented history, and whispered, "We understand." On the Coalition side, officers placed their hands over their hearts in silent respect. Even rogue pirate ships listening on the perimeter lowered their weapons, shaken by something greater than fear, humility. The Terran commander gave one final message. "The war ends today," he said, his voice soft as starlight. "What you build tomorrow, that is your choice." And then the hologram dissolved into blue particles, scattering like dust in the wind. The Terran ship slowly powered its engines, turning toward the void. Not toward any empire. Not toward any world. Just toward the unknown. And for the first time, the galaxy understood something beautiful and terrifying. The moment the Terran ship turned its colossal frame toward the silent stretch of uncharted space, a ripple of fear and awe spread across every vessel still lingering near the battlefield, because even though humanity had saved them, judged them, and forgiven them, the galaxy felt the overwhelming truth pressing deeply into every heart, that no one truly understood the Terrans. No one knew where they had been hiding. All these centuries. No one knew the full story of their survival, and the mystery of their power now hung over every world like an ancient shadow that refused to fade. Coalition captains watched the massive Terran flagship drift forward, engines glowing a soft, steady blue, leaving behind a trail of shimmering dust that felt almost like a blessing, while Zor-El war commanders stood frozen on their bridges, realizing that the empire they once believed was unstoppable was nothing but a brittle blade compared to the quiet steel of humanity. Commander Isilin pressed her trembling hand to the transparent viewport, unable to look away from the Terran ship as it slowly gained distance, her heart filling with a strange mixture of relief, sorrow, admiration, and fear. Relief that humanity had saved them, sorrow for the suffering humanity had endured, admiration for their impossible strength, and fear that the galaxy might never again see such a force if humanity chose to vanish once more. Selka sat alone inside her quiet fighter, eyes wet, staring into the void as the Terran vessel faded slowly into the horizon of stars, whispering, "They saved us, and they ask nothing in return." Her voice broke at the last word, because she knew the galaxy had never shown humanity mercy, had never shown them compassion, had never even acknowledged their pain. Yet here they were, returning not to rule, not to punish, but to protect the same galaxy that once hunted them to near extinction. As the Terran ship pulled farther away, the Terran fleet beyond it began blinking out one by one, disappearing through thin blue rifts that shimmered for a moment before collapsing gently into silence, like the universe closing its own wounds. No sound, no warning, no coordinates. Humanity came like ghosts, and now they left like shadows slipping beneath the surface of the sea. Every alien heart tightened as they watched the Terran armada vanish, because the greatest power the galaxy had ever seen was not staying to supervise or to govern. They trusted the galaxy to make its own choice. Trust, from humans. That was perhaps the biggest shock of all. On the Zor-El throne ship, the Emperor rose slowly from his seat, his legs weak, his pride shattered, tears drying on his cheeks as he whispered to his generals, "We must rebuild, not our empire, but our honor." His generals bowed silently, understanding that the old doctrines of conquest and pride were dead the moment the Terran symbol appeared on the battlefield. Across the galaxy, the coalition broadcast a universal message declaring the war officially ended, not by treaty, but by intervention, by the return of a species whose strength reshaped the stars. Billions listened as the announcement echoed across worlds. Some wept in relief. Some fell to their knees in gratitude. Some stared upward into the night sky, wondering where the humans had gone, wondering if they were watching, wondering if they would ever return again. But deep inside the battlefield, now quiet, calm, almost sacred, only one ship remained. The Terran flagship, glowing faintly as its hull absorbed the last dying sparks of the war's chaos. It hovered for a long moment, as if taking one final look at the place where the galaxy nearly destroyed itself. Then the human commander's voice returned one last time, not broadcasted through force, not echoing like thunder, but whispered softly across space as if speaking to every soul individually. "Remember this day," he said gently. "Not for what we did, but for what you must now do." The words drifted through the silence like a final breath, tender yet heavy with meaning. "We will watch. We will wait. We will hope." And then, with a sound softer than a sigh, the Terran ship folded into a thin line of blue light and vanished into the dark. Gone. Completely gone. No trace. No trail. Only silence left behind. A silence the galaxy had never heard before. A silence filled not with fear, but with hope. Because now the galaxy understood a truth so powerful it would be taught in every school, carved into every monument, and whispered across every star. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, not as ghosts, but as guardians who saved the galaxy from becoming the monster they once were forced to become. And though the Terrans disappeared again into the unknown, every species knew, deep in their hearts, that humanity was not gone. Not truly. They were watching. They were waiting. They were preparing for the day the galaxy needed them again. And that knowledge, that silent promise, echoed through every world, every ship, every life.